Creator, and you're going to take this moment for you, for yourself, a moment that you deserve, a time in your life to prepare to Shabbat. That's the whole idea of doing this program before Shabbat, that we can relax, refresh our minds, nurture our souls, free our minds, have a mindful moment, not a mind full of things, and then we can liberate our mind, free our mind, and free our soul, so we can nurture already pre-Shabbat to start, for us to start feeding our soul with good stuff, with lights, with words of Torah, with good ideas, to elevate our soul and to help everyone else, and to help myself as well. It helps me a lot to do this every Friday, so I'm sure, and I hope, it is my hope that it shares, that I have the same share for you, and the same wish that it also helps you. So in this parasha we have Parashat Varim and we have Moshe. This is the way the parasha starts, and I think it's going to give us a great sense of what's going on in our parasha, and we can learn from it. Ele advarim asher diber Moshe el kol Israel be'ever hayarden bamidbar ba'arava mol suf ben paran uben tofel ve'lavan bechatzerot ve'dizahav. What is it that it's saying? So it's telling us at this point of the Torah that Moses says, I want to translate specifically what it says. It says the following. It says that God, the Lord, right, talked to Moses to say, talk to all your congregation, the congregation of the children of Israel, and tell them the following, right? And I took the wrong book. And says the following. It said, talk to the people of Israel. So these are the words that Moshe spoke to the people of Israel, right on the other side of the Jordan, and still in the wilderness, in Arava, which is a place in front of facing the Suf, between Paran and Tofel, and Lavan and Hatzerot and Dizahav. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different places that are taken from this parasha. So why is it so important that we talk about these places? Why is it that he doesn't just say names? Why do we need actually a whole map of where they are and mention of all these places? Why is it that Moshe needs, or the Torah needs to tell us that he spoke surrounding these places, and to know, I mean, do we need a GPS? When you say send location, here's where we are, now we're going to start talking about it. Okay, so this is what Rashi says specifically. Rashi, who was one of the greatest commentators of the Torah, he said that there's a reason why the Torah mentioned these places, and this is what Rashi says. He said, because at first glance, right, this opening verse of Moshe's monologue, because he's going to start making 3 discourses, he's going to speak for 36 long days, and they seem to be right, I mean, just an opening statement, but without any apparent words of what he wants to say. He wants to tell the people all the wrongs that they did, all the sins that they committed. But instead of saying that, we have in the Torah what Rashi says, that is an allusion of something. So it says, each place mentioned, says Rashi, alludes to one of the many sins of the Israelites. Because this is quoting from Rashi, because these are words of reproof. Moshe enumerated here all the places where the Israelites provoked God to anger. They sinned and they upset God. Yet Moshe suppresses all mention of the matters and the details in which they sinned and refers to them only as mere allusions, right? This is an elusive thing contained in the names of these places out of regards of Israel. So here we learn from Moses, a very, very, very important lesson. Moshe teaches us very, very important lesson here. It's a principle for effective rebuke, for an effective admonition. So the big question is, why did he waited 40 years to tell the people all the wrongs and all the sins and all the mistakes that they had made and all the times that they infuriated God, that they make God's wrath, come alive? Why did he wait 40 years? So we're going to learn from this. I'm going to talk today. We're going to talk about rebuke, about how to rebuke, and the blessings of rebuke. So let's start by saying that rebuking, reproach, reprimand someone is a mitzvah in the Torah. And we read the following. Now I'm taking from Leviticus, from the book of Leviticus, the book of the book of Vayikra, and from chapter 19, verses 17 and 18. And you'll know this verse because it's very famous. Do not hate your kinsman or your brother or your sister in your heart. Admonish your neighbor, but incur no guilt because of them. Do not sin because of them. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against one of your people. Love your neighbor as yourself. I am Adonai your God. Right? So we know this very well. You have to rebuke, you have to admonish, you have to reproach, you have to tell someone when they did something wrong. But at the same time, the Torah is preventing you from sinning. So let's talk about how can you sin if you're going to rebuke someone. If the Torah tells me I am going to rebuke someone, if the Torah tells me that it's an important mitzvah to tell them that they did something wrong, how come I'm the one who is sinning? How come I can incur, in guiltiness or in sinning on doing something wrong because I am fulfilling a mitzvah? So we're going to talk about that as well today. And at the end, the famous, the middle and the core of the Torah. We hear that from Hillel too, right? And we hear in many different places. Even Jesus said it, many times. Because it's the core of the Torah. Love your neighbor. And we said the famous song says, Amma Rabbi Akiva, Amma Rabbi Akiva, ואהבת לרעך, לרעך כמוך, ואהבת לרעך, לרעך כמוך, זה כלל גדול, גדול בתורה, זה כלל גדול בתורה, ידה לי 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 די, ידה די 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 די, yada dai 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 dai, yada dai 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 dai, yada dai 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 dai, yada dai 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 dai, yada dai 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 dai, yada dai 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 dai, yada dai 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 dai, da dai 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 dai, yada dai 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 dai, yada dai 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 dai. Yada dai 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 dai. So let's talk tachlis. Tachlis in Yiddish means practical matters. Go to the bottom of the thing. Most people, and I'm saying that some of the teachings I learned from Rebbetzin Chana Bracha Siegelbaum from Israel. Some other lessons I learned from Rabbi Amy Elberg. So I want to give them the credit for teaching me about this subject so I can share with you today the words about the blessings of rebuke. So most people don't like to be criticized, right? I mean, I don't like. Perhaps maybe we can say nobody likes to be criticized. I don't. But we love to criticize others because that's what we do, right? We talk about the eye. We talk about that 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. We talk about that very carefully, what the eye sees and how we judge and how we criticize. But in my experience, the way and the tone of the voice, the way how you say things, in which the criticism is given, makes all the difference, right? Even when we are criticized and someone comes to us and talk, we can hear if that's a regular rebuke, if that's a regular reproach, or it comes really with a different tone. It comes from a different place. Perhaps we can say that it comes from the heart. But it can be very painful, especially, I think that we know this, by first hand, right? That when someone who supposedly loves you, and I say supposedly because sometimes people say, I love you, and then when they criticize you and they go into you and they judge you, you don't feel like it. You say, you really love me? I mean, if you love me, you really say those things that way? Is that the way you love me? Is that the way I don't want your love then? Right? Is that the way you express your love towards me? Then I don't want your love. When someone loves, even when you have to say painful things, even when you have to criticize and reproach. So when someone who supposedly loves you criticizes you in a very unloving way, very harshy and punchy, right? Maybe your husband or your sister, who knows? I mean, your best friend. So rather than being inspired to want to change, these kinds of criticism, and we know this very well, makes you feel, or it makes me feel, put down and hurt. Does it happen to you? It happens to me. And it happens to others when I am not going on the right tone either. So I have to also face, my own doings. So, it was said that the rabbi of Lubavitch once said, learning from also his master, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, that in preparation for giving an injection, right? You're going to go to the nurse, you're going to the doctor, and you're going to be given an injection by the anesthesiologist, maybe by just an injection for a vaccine, right? The doctor, nurse, what do we get when they even take blood out from us? They need to clean and be sure that a thorough cleaning of the skin to disinfect everything that can be there. So that implies that when we need to give rebuke, which is the needle, right? We must first clean ourselves thoroughly of negative motivations. I repeat, we must clean thoroughly ourselves from any negative motivations. If we are infected, we are going to infect anyone. It doesn't matter if you're right. It doesn't matter that they did something wrong. It doesn't matter that you are right. Sometimes it's not about being right, it's about how you say things. So, if you're going to push the needle, be sure that you are clean first of negative motivations. For example, anger, irritation, or what is worst, and we do so often, is to defend our egos. So only then we can really focus on the love towards that person who will eventually benefit from our reproach. It can only benefit if we really clean ourselves, if we really come from a place of love. So yes, it is a mitzvah, but it have to come from a place of love, or what they say, from your heart. So if you're going to really do something with your friends, right, you need to really clean yourself. Lesson number 1. Moreover, certainly do not add insult, right? Because it might happen that you're going to rebuke, and the person might be surprised. You might be surprised that actually the words that they hear are not the same words that you said. That means actually they're not accepting criticism. And we learned something different there. And I'm going to tell you a story. So actually we cannot really expect anyone to accept criticism. It's not like, yeah, you have to listen to me. You have to listen because you did this and this and that. And I love you, that's why I'm saying, but you have to listen. No, we cannot accept. We cannot think that actually the other person, we cannot expect that anyone is going to accept criticism, right? Think about you. Close your eyes if you want. Think about when they criticize you, right? And you say, yes, I always accept criticism, right? Okay, great. If you do, great. But it's not easy. So the only way to expect that they will accept criticism is if it's constructive criticism. If it's destructive, no way, Jose. Only if it's instructive and constructive criticism. Remember that to be critical means also to be condescending, right? You're kind of like, imagine this. Just get away, look at it from the balcony. Look at it with different lenses. When you're going to be critical about someone, that person, especially if you love that person loves you and has respect for you, they will feel embarrassed because they did something wrong. Especially if they acknowledge and identify they did something wrong, they're going to feel really embarrassed. And they will feel, right, regretful. That means that be critical means also to be condescending. So yet, it is possible to give rectified rebuke in a loving way. I will repeat, rectified rebuke in a loving way. So besides constructive and caring motives, the parameters for rectified rebuke include the following, and we're going to talk about this right now. How, to whom, and when. So to whom we rebuke, how do we rebuke, and when we rebuke. Let's start with the whom. So we know in the Torah says that we have to honor our parents, honor our teachers. So in a way, the Torah says, and even the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Jewish law of codes, right? That tells us, kind of the manual of instruction of Halacha, which is the Jewish law. It says specifically that you are not permitted to contradict. That says already the Torah, right? To contradict, you have to honor your parents and the elders. But the Shulchan Aruch said that if you see your parents, or your in-laws, or a teacher acting against the Torah, against something they did in the Torah, right? You have to honor them, but they're doing something wrong. I mean, like, they're really, they're doing something that is forbidden from the Torah, going against the laws. And then you may not rebuke them. Even the Shulchan Aruch says you have no way to rebuke them. You may only ask respectfully in a question like this. Doesn't it say such and such in the Torah? Doesn't it say so? You can bring something from the Torah or bring specifically the law they are infringing and tell them, doesn't it says in the Torah, etc. Right? So the same thing with the teacher. You're not going to rebuke them. You're not going to embarrass them in public. Or you're not going to talk to other ones and do lashon hara, right? Gossiping. Look what this teacher is doing. Look what. No. If you want to say something, you don't rebuke them. You ask respectfully, and you question, and bring something on the Torah that says, doesn't it says in the Torah. So if we notice our rabbis, as I said before, right, then you can tell them, didn't our teachers, our rabbis, our sages, Chazal, the teachers from the Talmud, didn't we say such and such? So the people, says the rabbis, the people that we have greatest responsibility are our children and our students. But although we have the mitzvah to do it, and they have the mitzvah to respect us, we must also show them respect, even as we reproach them. That doesn't mean that because they are your children or you are your kids or they are your students, you can slap them on their face, as you want. That's not okay. And this is good for educators. It's good because we as teachers are educators, right? Even the word in Hebrew, where I say orim, right? Teach, parents, it comes from the same root of the word also Torah, and the word also for more, for someone who's a teacher, and the Torah means a teaching. So remember, every time that you as parents are rebuking your kids, reproaching your kids, that you are teaching them, educating them. And education has to come from what we learned just now, with love. Education has to come from a place of love. That's to whom. Now, how? How we will rectify? In addition to the pure reasons and the pure motivations, right? To help, because when you rebuke someone, it's not to say, look what you did, and in front of everyone, even if you're alone, and say, look what you did. You don't want to be in a position that I am better than you. That's judging them. And who are you to judge? Who am I? I am not God. Right? I'm not saying I haven't said it and I haven't done it. You know, I'm learning from it. I'm learning myself. I'm working on myself. That's why I am also sharing this with you. Everything that I learn, everything that I'm working on, whether I succeed or not, I am learning myself. I am not here in a position of I'm not here in a position right now of telling you what to do and what not to do. I'm here to share my lessons in life as well. And so I'm just going to change the position so you don't get distracted for a second. I'm sorry about this. So again, I'm teaching from my own lessons in life, from my own failures. Everything I share here. That's why I love this space, because while I work on things, I love to share. And maybe some of you are going through the same thing, but you can learn something from it as I'm learning. So I am not here in a position of I am better than you. Not at all. But that's something is important. That's why I say, you know, that if you want to help the person, you cannot think that you cannot be in a place of arrogance, in a place I do better than you. I've done that so much, you know, right? And we can do that in so many different places as people. Let's just put an example of being Jewish, right? In a Jewish world, it's an example all the time, you know, like how kosher I am, right? You're kosher, so I'm kosher than you. I go, you know, I pray more than you, and you know, all these things, right? And then when someone is not praying or someone is making mistakes, you know, like in the dishes or in the kashrut, right? I still rebuke my wife all the time, you know, about, you know, kashrus and you know, what to put in the dish and what not to put in the dish, and also to Oscar. And I realized, you know, that put me in a position, or I was placed in a position like I know more than you, or I made less mistakes than you. Then I started to make a lot of mistakes because that's the way God works. And I started to make a lot of mistakes myself, you know, about mixing dishes and using different sponges, you know, the wrong things. I mean, and mixing up stuff. And then it's only then when you realize actually that you're not better than anyone. It's just to say that you make the mistakes as well. And believe me, and I learned this, you know, in the hard way. Every time that you rebuke someone and you place yourself in a position of being better, in a position of I know better, in a position I do it better than you, that's why I'm rebuking you, that's why I'm reproaching you, that's how I am, you know, admonishing you. Believe me that God puts you in that position in 2 seconds. If it's not that day, it's the week after or the day after. And then if you have sechel and you have a little conscience, that's exactly what happens. And then you kind of live through the same thing and you say, how could I have been so arrogant? So so let's continue here. So in addition to having pure motivations, right, you want to help the other person that you love, it is very important to wrap, this is important, to wrap the bitter pill in a sweet coating. Anything that is bitterness about that rebuke, just wrap it up as a gift and put it in sweet coating. Okay? Transform that bitterness in sweetness. Remember, you are teaching. You are coming from a place of love. Don't get all that bitter anger towards them because it's not their fault. You are there because you saw something that you might help them to grow, to elevate. Not for that you are better, and no, for that they are less. So if you don't feel love for that person that you want to rebuke, it is better, just let go. Don't do anything. If you're just really going to explode and throw anger, and you have no love, you don't care about that person, that's a different story why you wouldn't care. But if you don't, be honest, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Because only words that come from the heart, and this is the key, only words that come from the heart will enter the heart only. So remember, prior to rebuking, prior to say the words you're about to say, take a few moments to meditate and get in touch with the feelings of love that you have deep down in your heart for every human being. For every human being. And remember that love comes from first place. It's to love yourself. We talk so many times about this, but it's true. Loving yourself is no selfishness. A lot of people say, "I'm so selfish." No. Loving yourself means actually that you can care about yourself. And that's also written in the Torah. You have to take care of yourself. So when it says love your neighbor as yourself, you love your fellow human being as yourself. So I ask you, and put your hand in your heart, close your eyes, and just think, how much do I love myself? Oh, do I love myself? That's a very important question. A very important question. Because if you don't love yourself, you aren't able to love anyone in this world. As much as you can say I love you to your spouse, your kids, if you're upset with yourself, you're angry about something about yourself, you're frustrated, and there's something you don't like about yourself, about some behaviors, maybe even physically you don't like something about yourself, you're going to criticize the whole world about the same thing. You don't like your hair? Right, I don't have hair, but you don't like your hairdo? You're going to go and criticize the world about your nose. You don't like your nose? You're going to go and hate everyone who has like a beautiful nose, and you're going to criticize. That's the way it works. So love yourself, accept yourself, who you are. God made you, right? And if you think that God made you as an image of God, then you are an image of God. Even if we look differently, love yourself. So when you rebuke, we become very sensitive, right? And we'll notice whether the words come from love or not. Just don't think about when you rebuke someone, when they rebuke you, when they criticize you. How does it come? You like when someone comes and say, "How come you did it?" Right? Or you like when they say, "Come here, I just want to talk to you. Hey honey, when I saw you, doing this, and I don't know, how do you feel? What do you think? I just thought," right? Totally different. That makes a huge difference, isn't it? So let's review. Coming from love, you want to clean thoroughly your motivations. Come from heart, from love side. Remove all the anger, irritations. And then you can go and rebuke. And I'm going to insert here a quote from a rabbi that says the following. It's very interesting. It says, this comes from Iturei Torah. It says, first, before you're going to rebuke, first rebuke yourself. Listen to this. First rebuke yourself, and only then you can rebuke your fellow man, your neighbor. For it will become clear that you too have a share in his or her transgression. Listen to this. So first rebuke yourself, then you can go and rebuke the other. So what happens when you're about to rebuke someone and you're like about to say something they did wrong? Just rebuke yourself. Think about when you were in that situation. If you were never in that situation, just think about something you did wrong and rebuke yourself. Be honest. Be honest. There's nothing better than knowing yourself and be honest. Like, I did this wrong, my God. So become clear, says, you will become clear when you rebuke yourself first, before you rebuke someone else, that you too have a share, listen to this, have a share in his or her transgression. Because it says in the same passage that we read, the mitzvah of rebuking, but it says, just following that passage, that line says, and do not place on him sin. Right? Do not place the burden of sin only on him. Share it. So how come you can share it? Just very interesting, right? And then it says the following. Thank you so much. Gracias. Bye. Hasta luego, gracias. Do not place the burden of sin only on him or her. This is taught in the name of Baal Shem Tov, which is mentioned here before. The rebuker from Polnoye, right? Apparently there were people who were having this as a job to rebuke others. So probably they learned a lot of the laws of how to rebuke. So if someone needs to be rebuked, they went to the rebuker. So this rebuker of Polnoyer, he explains further and says, if your fellow has sinned, know that you too are not entirely innocent of that same sin. You are his or her partner in this transgression. If not in actual deed, then in thought and intention. This is very deep. I will repeat. If your fellow has sinned, know that you too are not entirely innocent of that same sin. You are his or her partner in this transgression. If not in actual deed, then in thought and intention. In other words, be very careful when you're going to rebuke. This is very deep. This is a little bit of what we were saying before. People are mirrors of ourselves. So when you're going to go and tell someone that bothers you, that you're going to rebuke and you're going to put the finger, think about where you are. Why is it you that you saw that? Why is it you the one who was in front of that image, in front of that event, of that episode, that moment? Think about it. How much of that situation, of that transgression, was not also, or is not part of what you need to rectify as well, to fix? Think about it. It is deep. This is usually what we do, right? Like this. It's my finger. But let me just turn the finger like this. So when you say you, look. One finger there, three pointing to me. So remember, very visual. When you point to someone, three fingers point to you. Think about it. So it looks simple, it looks easy, without thinking, without putting your heart, your conscience. easy when we are in the shallow of and the surface of the situations, but elevate yourself for a second. Let's see if we can do it. Go into the balcony and look. And then look inside you. Look at the work that we have to do before we open our mouth to say that someone did something wrong. Look at the amount of deep and depth that it has to go and rebuke someone, even if it's a mitzvah. Remember, admonish your neighbor but incur no guilt because of them. I mean, do not go and sin also because you're going to become angry. How could you sin? Many different ways. One is become angry, and then now you're sinning. So now it's like, right? Usually a mitzvah goredet mitzvah and avera goredet avera. So that means actually a mitzvah brings another mitzvah and a sin brings another sin. And so don't go into doing a mitzvah and then shoot yourself with a sin, because that is going to bring another sin. That's why Lashon Hara is so bad. You open the mouth saying something, gossiping about someone else, boo, 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 it's an non-end, it's endless. So we talk about the whom, we talk about the how. Let's talk about also, there's something more about the how. And it says the following, right? We know it says ochea tochiach, right? That you rebuke, you shall rebuke even though. Even if you go 100 times, the question is what happened, right? And how do we know when to, you're going to rebuke, and then they repeat it itself. And then how many times it is enough for you to say to that person, actually, to rebuke that person as many times as what? I mean, when is the limit? When do you finish? How many times you go and tell someone? In the Talmud, is in Babylonian Talmud, in the Masechet, in the Tractate of Arachin, right? It says that even 100 times you have to go and rebuke. Also written in the Talmud Baba Metzia. So we are not permitted, however, quote, to do so harshly and to put him to shame. As the Torah verse concludes, do not suffer sin because of him. That's what we said before. Now, then it says the Midrash, Tanchuma, it says the following: if you rebuke your brother or your sister, and she or he does not listen, because that's the other thing, right? You might ask like, okay, I rebuked them, but they don't listen. They just don't accept it, right? And you go from love, and you do all your work. You point your finger at you first. You rebuke yourself first. I mean, you do all the inner rebuking exercise. And even with all that, then you go into your brother and sisters, and then they don't want to listen. Then it is you who is to blame. Words from the heart enter the heart. Wow. Wow. Even if you think that you did all the work that you need to do, right? And then you go and they don't listen, you are to blame. Can you imagine? This is deeper than the other stuff. This is very deep. This is very, wow. I will let you think about it. It means that probably we didn't do the work well. At this point you might be like arguing, no, it's their fault, because we always like to give responsibility to the other. Right? From, when we're already little, and then you are playing with siblings, and then something happened, and then the parents come, and then you always, they did it, right? You never can accept your responsibilities. And I tell you something, responsibility, and that's for another talk, but responsibility, it's a gift that God gives to every human being. So giving responsibility to other one and giving it away, you are giving something very precious. You're giving something out that is so precious, that as responsibility. So don't give it out. Don't give out your responsibility. That's so precious, it's yours. I mean, many times they ask us, if we can give out our money for tzedakah, and we have like hesitation. They might ask you for a pair of shoes, or for your, could you give up your car? And you say, no way, right? For physical things, material things, we are very attached to it. But for responsibility, we give it away right away, right? We just say, yes, take my responsibility, right? It's not me, it's not mine. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. The responsibility is yours, it's mine, and I'm not going to give it to you. Take responsibility. So if you rebuke your brother or your sisters and they don't listen, even 100 times, and they don't listen, I'm sorry, my fellow friend, and I'm sorry for myself. It's our fault. We are to blame. Because the words that come from the heart, from deep in your heart, not that you say, yes, it's coming from my heart, I really love you, huh? No. You know what it comes from the heart. When you can clean up all the veils, right? All the shells, all the mosquitoes, that's when you start really appreciating what the real heart, and how coming from a real deep heart, from deep sense of the soul, that's when you really start talking from there, and they listen. There is resistance. In psychology, they say the following, that if your client resists, it's the psychologist's fault. That means you're not speaking their language. As simple as it is. So yes, the Torah is full of psychology. Now when is the right time? Because as soon as something you see that is wrong, what do you want to do? Right away. Hey, you! Right? Even if you're in the grocery store and someone did something, hey, you just cut the line. Right, you're not going to wait probably as long as it's suggested now in the text that I have here. But still, timing is everything. Timing is everything. So it's not the time of your ego. It's not the time of your intellect. It's the time of your heart. It's the time of your soul. Timing is everything. Everything. So when is the good time? When is the right time? So the worst time, let's talk about first when is the worst time, so at least we know what not to do. The worst time for rebuking or reprimanding is when it's either angry, hungry, depressed, exhausted, or just simply tired. So don't get that person when can easily get irritated, that person is not going to be open and flexible and as you want it. Just respect their status at that moment, the stage, emotional stage. So whenever possible, wait just until a bit that time has elapsed, and so that your own irritation has abated and your friend is in a receptive mood. So if you're also hungry, if you're also angry, if you're also depressed, exhausted, or tired, you're going to lose it, right? Your cables are like, short circuit. And if they are that's the same emotional stage, don't go for it. I mean, be rested. That's why resting is so important. Not only resting your mind, resting your body, but resting your soul. Resting, right? Give space for any mixed feelings and any bad mood or any negative feelings that you might have. Give space to that so God can also act out and can give a little light to that space. So here's a metaphor for you. We do not perform any operation, you can ask a surgeon, unless the patient is in good enough health, right, to endure the procedure. Same thing here. So the teachers of Musar, which is how we, the Musar is this practice and part of Judaism, allows us to take care and to fix and to work on ourselves and our character traits. So it says, the masters of Musar, they say, teach that it is harder to fix one midah. Midah is like a character trait, right? To fix actually anger, or to fix, just let's say anger, right? To fix anger is more difficult than to learn the entire Talmud and to learn the entire laws of the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Jewish law. That's why it's so important to work on yourself. It is harder to even cure one character trait than to learn the whole Talmud and the Shulchan Aruch all together. Wow. So make sure that the object of your rebuke, meaning the person that you're going to rebuke, is in an emotionally healthy state and open to hearing your suggestions for any change that you would like with love for that person to exercise. The Torah has guidelines for the ultimate timing for rebuke. On his deathbed, Yaakov, remember Jacob, our forefather? He was in the deathbed. He was about to die. He called all the children and he started rebuking some of them, but he blessed them with some words of rebuke. So it says, the sages says that when a person is right before dying, or a person has been temporarily absent, right, from a trip and then comes back, people have more reception, or they are more receptive to listen to that person, to learn from them. Right, when someone is dying and you say, whatever they say, you're not going to go against it. And you haven't seen a person for a while, and then at least the first hours and the first days, you're like a honeymoon. And you are so receptive until a short circuit comes again. But the same is true also for the first time you see someone, right, who return from a trip. And when you have been missed, your words will be absorbed of a great extent. That means actually, what they're trying to say is that making space is what you need. Making space, because timing is everything. So remember in today's parasha, Moses waited not just a few days, but he waited 40 years. But because of that, they were inclined to listen to him, right? And remember what he did? He just mentioned places. I remember very well, something happened in certain places, like in the summer, and I had like a fight, I misbehaved, and then my parents, reprimanded me or rebuked me, and it just took only to mention that place of the summer that we were vacationing, only just to mention that place. They needed to say what they did, they needed the details. They just told me, remember what happened? No, they just said that place. And then I was like, okay, I got it. Same thing here. Moses just mentioned the places. And he is a master of the rebuke. That from this opening statement, we learn so much from Moshe. Right? He's a model for us as to when, to how, and how to rectify rebuke. Another one that we learn from is Nathan. Remember the prophet? Well, you might remember this story very well. David, right? What happened with David? Well, David took for a wife, right, Bathsheba. But before, he did some things that were not good. First of all, Bathsheba was married, and he sent Bathsheba's husband in the front line of the battlefield to die. Right? Literally was to send him to die. And he did. And then he took Bathsheba for his wife because he loved her and he was like so much, crazy about her. But then God sends the prophet Nathan to talk to David. How does Nathan talk to David? Remember? This is in the book of Samuel 2 and chapter 12, verses 1-4. It says, in a parable, it tells a story about the rich man, right? Remember that? So it says that, regarding the law pertaining, to a rich man who had many sheep and cattle but stole the one sheep of a poor man, right? This guy has a lot of money and he goes to the poor guy, and steal, right, the only savings he has. And also that sheep that poor man loved dearly. And then, immediately David reacted. If you remember, David said, we should kill that man. That man should die. And then Nathan looks at his eyes and says, David, that man was you. What do we learn from here? It says that because the Talmud says when you know, right? You know how to say this. How, you know, there are different ways of how to say it, and it is important because when you rebuke, try by all means. And this is a lesson for all. To save the face of the person. To save the face. I mean, try to save the face of the person that you're rebuking by saying the minimum necessary. There's no need to go to the scars and then just, you know, and the needle ding, 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 ding. You just say the minimum as necessary for the other person to understand. So your friend will figure it out by himself or herself. People are more inclined to connect with messages that they themselves figure out. You can say few words. You don't have to say the whole thing. Look at Moses. Look at my mom when she said Mar del Plata, right? Look at Moses. He mentioned just some places. People of Israel got it. Got it. Enough for them to do teshuvah, to figure out themselves, right? We're about to enter the land of Israel. Moses reminding us when we were not behaving well. It happens to all of us. But he didn't say, when you did this, and you did the golden calf, and you did also this, and you protested for the manna, and you also were in, you know, like with the prostitutes of Midianites, and the Canaanites, and the Moabites. No. No, 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 no. Just say the minimum necessary, and let the person figure it out. If you're going farther than that, that means it's not coming from the heart. So, use parables. Use stories, right? Don't use the logic. You might illustrate differently. That's why the Hasidic stories are so beautiful. Parables, fables. That's why the Haggadah part of the Talmud is so beautiful, right? When they tell you the stories, you get it. You learn from the stories a lot. That's why they exist. Sometimes we don't want to face the real reality, and we don't need to all be all the time in reality. We can learn about reality with different examples. So for sure we can learn from Moshe and Nathan to give our words of reproof in a subtle way, which allows our friends to figure out by himself, or allows us to have a hint. So Moshe's motivations were pure. They were pure and motivations of love for his people that prompted his refined and tender words to reproof. He, Moses, Moshe, and Moshe Rabbeinu, our leader that we learned so much from, as he was the rabbi and the mentor and their leader, had the responsibility to set the people straight at this auspicious time before his demise. The Israelites understood then, as do we do now. So Moshe's message reflected his genuine concern for Israel, since Moshe's words sprung from his heart. They entered the hearts of his people. And that's what we learned so much of today's lessons. So it's very important also to learn. There's so many things about it, to talk about it. I will ask you just a few minutes, just a few reflections, if you want to close your eyes before we finish today. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that we can have some lessons, we can learn so much about the blessings of rebuking, to fulfill the mitzvah in a real way without sinning ourselves, to really fulfill the other mitzvah also of loving your neighbor or your fellow human being as yourself. In today's word, with the COVID-19 and the pandemic. We're rebuking all the time, and we protest and get frustrated. People don't wear masks, and people don't do their jobs, and people don't clean themselves, and people abuse of others. People take advantage also of things. And you can see those actions and those behaviors, but don't feel you're better, because we made mistakes on other things. We are imperfect, right? That's why we are here, to fix so many of our character traits, to fix so many things of our behavior. So what you want is not to jump into conclusions. And if you really love creation, if you really love this world, if we really love this world, this creation from God, the universe, the earth, and we really love animals and love plants, and we really love ourselves, and we love our fellow man and our planet, don't jump into conclusions impulsively to go and rebuke others. When you watch even in the news, you don't think that because you don't talk to that person and say, I cannot believe what he has, right? First, they're not listening to you. But your words out of it, and last week we talked about the quality of your words and the importance of words. So anything that comes out from your mouth, it's an action of creation. Even if that person on the other side of the TV cannot listen and hear you, right? Do not rebuke them either. Or if you're going to rebuke them, you're going to say something, say it from heart. Or believe it. Remember, rebuke yourself first. So when you go out from here and from listening to this session or part of this session, and you hear and you got to this part, is because you have to get to this part. Some people might probably drop the ball already of this Facebook Live, but if you are here, it's because God put you there to listen. So don't go now. Just stay there for a sec. Take a deep breath in and rebuke yourself for anything that you think you've done wrong. But do it from, don't hurt yourself. Don't harm yourself. Love yourself. Appreciate yourself. Be thankful, grateful. Give yourself a big hug. And I hope you have a great Shabbat. I love you all. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. And let's have a great start in this period of the beginning of the month of Av, the Hebrew month. These 9 days are very harsh in the world, and the energy, as they said, is not easy. So more than ever, love yourself. Do a tikkun, a fixing, a repairing of love. Hatred can be transformed in love. So just love yourself so you can love others. You can love the world as it is. Don't put commas, don't put buts.